76% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Is that you? I'm the CEO of 5 different companies. I wasn't born into it. We lived on welfare, but I wanted more. I created this show, The School of Wealth, helping people escape poverty like I did. I want to help you out of that consumer debt, teach you how to increase your credit score, teach you how to make more money at your current job or your current business, and then how to actually create generational wealth without changing your lifestyle. It is going to be a lot of fun. This is not like regular school. Hey, I'm Ronnie Lambeth, and this is The School of Wealth. Hello and welcome to the show. Today, I have a very special guest for you. This is the first time actually meeting her and talking to her. Her name is Jenny. I've been practicing this and now I just screwed it up.
Totally.
Salerno. Say it for me.
Salerno.
So I don't know why that's so hard for me right now.
I thought you just had it.
I just had it. Salerno. I just screwed it up. But you know what? That's how I roll. I'm not going to go and edit it and start over. So
No, that makes it real and raw.
I know. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. All right, Jenny. So Jenny is a good friend of a very good friend of mine. I've heard tons about you, single mom, successful business owner. You've been doing self-development and coaching with yoga for the last 4 years. And I've never had somebody on the show that's ever talked about yoga.
Hey, look at that.
Yeah. But you use yoga a little different than just for stretching and exercise. You use it more to maybe embed your self-development stuff. Is that correct? Am I putting words in your mouth?
Actually, no, I think that was actually a really great way to say it. Yeah, the physical body is a great way to make a little change.
All right. And you are where are you at right now?
In Utah.
Utah.
Salt Lake
here.
Utah would be like the best place to say.
Salt Lake. Okay. I'm here at my home office in Boise. I think we have fairly similar climates, except for you get a lot more snow than Boise does.
Yeah. Right now, I'm not looking forward to that. I'm enjoying the sun.
Yeah.
I like the heat because I'm not from here originally. So I think I just pretty much prefer the sun and warm weather.
We'll just go to Vegas if you want the sun and warm weather.
Yeah, or I just go to California.
Yeah, there you go. I was in Vegas like 3 weeks ago and it was 116 degrees. It was absolutely miserable.
That's like a different kind of heat, I feel like. That's like a whole other level.
Whole different level. And then I was in San Diego and it was hot and I had to wear a mask, which made it even worse, which we won't go down that rabbit hole.
That is a whole other rabbit hole that I would probably join you in.
Yeah. So Amanda, our friend Amanda, had reached out and she said something like, you should have Jenny on your podcast. And I was like, well, I don't know. I've never had a yoga instructor on the podcast. Like, what's going on with that? So tell me about that. What made you and Amanda come up with this idea to come on the podcast?
Well, I think because it goes beyond the yoga side of things. Yoga to me is, I think when you hear the word yoga, immediately everyone always goes to exactly what you stated, right? The stretching. And that's what most people visualize it as. And yoga to me is more of like just a life. Like yoga represents how to connect in every possible way in life. So that's what I think. So I think that would be more of the reason why. And that it may be a great little snippet for what you already do because you are more of a spiritual realm and that kind of side.
Yeah, and Amanda had said something the effect of Jenny has a great story and it's going to fit in with what you talk about in, your stuff, and you should have her on. So let me ask you, how many podcasts have you done in the past? One. Okay, so this is number 2.
This would be number 2. And I don't think we ever aired that one. It was kind of like a trial thing for her too. So this would be like the real number 1. Let's go with that.
Okay.
You watched my name. Oh, this is the real number 1.
There it is. I blotched Salerno. So bad. I'm sorry.
Awesome.
Our good friend, mutual friend, Ed Milet, he's horrible with names as well. And I'm so conscious about it because people pronounce my name wrong so many times. In fact, I had this guy today. He keeps calling me Robbie and emailing me Robbie, and he wants me to literally spend tens of thousands of dollars with him, and he can't even get my name right. You know, it's not Robbie, it's Rondi. Get it right. So,
and then maybe you'll talk money.
and then maybe we'll talk money. All right. So let's talk. Amanda really wanted you to come on the show and share your story. And then she told me a little bit about it, but she started telling me a little bit more today. Oh. And I said, hey, let's do this. Let's let Jenny tell me the story, and then I can be surprised and hear it from her. So
yeah,
for all of you listening right now and all of you watching on YouTube, I have not heard it yet. So all I know is Jenny's a badass yoga instructor that also does self-development and helps a lot of young kids and young women really figure shit out in their life and just make it a better life. And kind of like a Joe Dispenza, if you will. Joe Dispenza uses meditation while walking. Jenny does self-development and personal development, self-improvement through yoga. So how did you get started doing what you do?
Well, get started in doing what I do. I think the beginning would be, I think my life story is what leads towards this direction. Like whenever we look back, it's the dots that connect us to where we are now, right? So
did you grow up in Salt Lake?
I grew up in Southern California, in Newport Beach area. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So that to me is definitely home. However, the beauty here in Utah is, unlike anything else. So you can't really complain. But for me, it definitely did start at the age of 14. And that was, I think, my biggest. There are 3 really huge pivotal moments, but there's been a ton of things. But the first one would be when I was 14. Totally innocent young girl, start my freshman year. I had just turned 14 in the summer, start my freshman year to high school. It's in the first quarter of the school year, and I go to a party. Think nothing of it. I go with some friends, and now we're in high school, we're freshmen, so we think it's cool. So we go to this party, and there's a bunch of football players, and my brother was a senior at the time, was not at this party though. And some of the guys on the team, since they knew me, were talking to me. One of them decided to lead me on a little tour. So this tour then led to my first impactful moment in life. And it ended up being a rape situation, one where couldn't get away, no one could hear me. It was in like an office kind of building. So I think the reason why Amanda was bringing it to you is just because I don't think women feel comfortable enough to express when things like this happen. And I was one that didn't feel that, because the first time I decided to tell someone what happened, because when I walked out, I was like, I have to leave this place, I have to leave. And I remember just like trying to bail out of there as fast as I could. So then I went to my best friend at the time and told her, and she replied to me and was like, that didn't happen. It's okay. You just had sex. Everything's fine. And I was like, no, I did not. And no, I didn't want it. And she's like, Jen, don't say that. You wanted it. So from that point on, when she told me that it wasn't what went down, I literally shut my mouth. And then this led down a whole pathway that changed the trajectory of where I could have been heading. But I'm not going to say that in a negative way whatsoever.
Yeah. Okay.
And so when you begin to shut your mouth, and I never came home and told my family, because if she doesn't believe me, who's going to believe me? And my household was very religious. So I was like, well, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. Well, then I started turning to drinking, and I was an athlete. I'd been running track since 6th grade, and I was ridiculously fast, and was invited to do an ESPN competition and stuff like that. But then I started to turn to drugs, alcohol, eating disorder, all these things to kind of fill the void of shame and guilt that women and girls and teens carry when situations like this happen. Well, so fast forward, the track career that I was excelling at then starts to diminish because drugs and alcohol don't really mix with someone that's a sprinter. And then the eating disorder, I get so wafy. And then it leads to keeping all this in and just the outbreaks and things like that, then I started to become suicidal. I started cutting. This is before it was like a big thing. Like, most people didn't know that women were doing this or girls were doing this. And then I would try to like slit my wrists. Then one day I said, screw it, and took a whole bottle of Tylenol, like then it was Price Club. So it would be like Costco, big huge bottle, down the whole thing. Wow. Bottle on the floor. I'm on the floor. My dad, thank God, came walking in, found me on the floor, took me to the hospital. Then I ended up in the hospital. Suicide to keep you. Well, then they were like, she's underweight. There's something else going on. It kept me for a very long time. So now I'm in a psych ward, mental institution, right? For suicide, eating disorder. And then finally, so this is me at 16 now. And I get out, doesn't get better. I'm then admitted again, but my brothers had to literally like take me by force to put me back in. And then this is when it finally came out in the open that I had been raped. So finally the family finds out all these things. I get out of the hospital, life keeps moving forward. And then I meet this guy, start dating a guy. I think he's like amazing. And things start to change there too. And all of a sudden it becomes a very abusive situation. Now, not to say
16.
At this point now I'm 17, almost 18 when I meet this guy.
So you're still in high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how old is he?
He is a year older than me.
Okay. So he's still young. He's still a teenager, just like you.
Yeah,
okay.
We're close in age. And I will also say, because of where I was mentally, I ended up starting my career at a very young age and left my home and moved out. So then I'm dating this guy, living on my own, and it becomes a very abusive situation, to the point that one night I go out for a girls' night, and we'd been together for about 3 years at this point, and there'd been some abuse. I never left. I actually did get pregnant. There's another incident. There's so many things that went on in my life, and I had an ectopic rupture. So it like exploded, bled for 24 hours. Really interesting experience there. But I feel like the more pivotal thing that happened was, now I'm 20. Jen has fake ID, of course, why not? And then I go to a bar with my girlfriend, have a girls' night out, and we have one drink, got roofied. He showed up because he clearly didn't trust the situation, sees me and I am gone, and my receipt shows I only had one drink, and he pulls me out of the bar. And I have like, it's almost like when you watch a movie and you only see like little screenshots of the situation. Yeah. Like all I remember are these little like flashes of the moment. I remember being pulled out of the place, and he was redoing a vintage car. So we're inside this classic car, and it's all metal on the inside. The outside's all nice and done, but the inside hadn't been completed. And I just remember him taking corners so fast that I like hit the metal from side to side. Wow. And then we finally get to the house, and I remember just being on the floor. It was the next vision I remember, being on the floor because I'm sick. I'm totally out of it. And then I remember coming to, and he's holding a gun to my head. And he's yelling and screaming at me, literally gun cocked to my head. And I remember staring at it, and I was just like, please don't let this be that time. And clearly it's not. So, and you think that that would be a moment you leave someone, but I didn't. And I stay with him. We live together now at this point. I come home. I used to do makeup for like one-night shows and photo shoots. And I come home from work for lunch, and he's there, and we have this huge fight. And this fight was the one that finally I was like, okay, that's enough. To the point where I'm bleeding, bruised, cut up. I jump in my car to try to leave really fast. He jumps on top of it. Anyhow, I end up leaving. I end up just like leaving California just to get out of the whole situation, because it was not a good situation. So then there's that. Then I meet, fast forward a few more years down the road, I meet the guy that I ended up having my kids with. And I think he's amazing. He's got it all together. So I'm like, oh.
So I want to stop you for a second.
Yeah.
So you get roofied. Mm-hmm. He shows up because he's jealous or he doesn't trust you.
Right.
And his reaction to that is to beat you up and hold a gun to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I mean, there's a lot, like I could probably tell my story for a very lengthy period of time. I'm trying to condense it
Yeah.
for your
No.
audience's sake, but it's a really interesting story of events. But yeah, that is.
The reason that I bring that up is my mom was beaten and raped a lot from my biological father. And I remember her, him beating her up, and he'd leave, and then we'd leave, we'd run away, just leave everything there. And we'd end up in a women's shelter for a while. And then 6 months would go by, and then he'd show up, beat her up, rape her, she'd get pregnant, kind of thing. And according to my mom, that's how I was conceived. And my brother being 10 months younger than me, I have a high suspicion that that's probably what happened with my brother Jeremy. And I'm pretty sure it happened with the other two brothers that I have with my mom and my full brothers. So it's always intrigued me that why women stay with men that beat them and abuse them, whether it's verbally, physically, emotionally, or whatever. And it wasn't until recently that I went through my own thing. Like when I say my own thing of forgiving my father for it and forgiving my mother for it, for what she did, that I realized that it's because she felt like she didn't have any options. Like, where's she going to go? She's a 20-year-old with 4 kids dropped out of high school, and she's a waitress that makes $2 an hour. So the reason I want to interrupt you on that is if someone's listening right now, and whether it's a female or male, my son, and he doesn't listen to the show, and so he's not going to get pissed off. He's pissed off at me right now anyway. He attracts women who beat him. They slap him, they hit him, they abuse him, and I don't get it. I would never put up with that. But on the other side of it, I kind of understand it, with my mom and with women, why they do it. But if you're listening right now and you're getting abused, there's help out there. Just leave. Like, there's help. You can do better. You can get support, whether it's a shelter or a church or something else. So I just wanted to throw that out there before someone disconnected on it. So
No, I love that. I really do like that. And I think, that is the question that people ask a lot, is like, because, I mean, like he threw knives at me. I have a scar on my foot, like literally jolted a knife and stabbed my foot. People are like, well, why didn't you leave then? Or why didn't you leave when the gun was to your head? Like, there's so many moments where you're like, why didn't you just leave?
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, from what I gather with people that I work with and personal experience, for me, it's more of understanding that I had no self-worth. I didn't see my worth, so I didn't feel strong enough to leave.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it comes down to a lot of that understanding who you genuinely are and feeling confident and strong enough to be like, you know what?
Do you feel like that maybe you didn't deserve that love, and you kind of deserve to be beaten, deserve to be abused?
Yeah, and I can definitely pin it to when I was raped, because from that point on, I was like, all right, well,
that's what I was getting at. I know. I read all of Don Miguel Ruiz's books, and I talked about books a lot on the show, and I love Don's books. And a couple weeks ago, I was in Alaska, and I was talking with my buddies up there. And I was telling one of the guys, like, I screenshot when I'm reading books and I see something that's really impactful. I'll take a picture of it with my phone, and then I store it on my phone, and I have a whole album of pictures of things that I read in books. And so I'm telling my buddy, he's 24, 25 years old. Name is Davij. And he goes, can I see this? And I'm like, sure, here's my phone. Look at it. And he spends about, 10, 12 minutes reading it, because I have tons of pictures of pages in my book. And what's interesting, he goes, I can see from these screenshots you're going through a ton of self-love. Like, that's what I was screenshotting, was in the book Mastery of Love, and then the 5 levels of attachment. It was all self-love stuff. And when you're abused as a kid, and even as an adult, whether it's rape or physical abuse or mental abuse. Um, I think you got to work on yourself, and you got to work on loving yourself first, right?
Mhm.
And obviously I'm not a counselor. I'm a credit dude, you know, but that's what I've found through it is you got to start working on loving yourself. So back to your story. So now you're living with somebody and he's the father of your kids. Were you married with
So I
him?
did. We ended up dating, and I ended up
Okay.
we actually met in Utah, ironically. I was here doing makeup for a show and went to the gym. There was this guy, had a very different look.
Mhm.
We ended up talking. Very funny. He has a great personality, especially when you meet him. He's got a really charismatic personality. So it was very like, oh, this is fun. I'm laughing. This is great. We start dating, and I fly home, I fly back, and then I'm like, all right, I'll just sublease my place and I'll stay here. And we keep courting, keep dating. We date for 3 years. Now we get engaged. And this is probably a great moment too. I kind of knew this is where I know I had not done any self work. I had started doing yoga, but have not started doing any self work. I was doing it just for the physical thing. And I'm engaged to get married. It's the night before my wedding. Well, actually, it was Vegas bachelorette party. I get a message from him, and he tells me what the name of our first son is going to be. And I was like, oh shit. And my heart starts pounding. I look at my girlfriends, and I was like, I'm not ready for this.
Yeah.
Then the night before our wedding, I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I'm like, I can't do this. I cannot do this. And I start to literally run, like runaway bride. Like I'm literally starting to run. So my mother and sister are here, and they're like, don't leave. You're just having cold feet. This is your pattern. Because in all reality, yeah, it is my pattern, because
Yeah.
all this stuff I had been through in my life, I never really got myself together. And my pattern was to just flee the situation because if it was unbearable. So they're thinking that that's what's happening with me. But I'm just like, I got to get out. Can't do this. And then I'm like, no, I can't marry him. I don't want to marry him. And so anyways, obviously, clearly get married the next day. And great wedding. And then I get pregnant on birth control 4 months later.
Okay.
I'm going to say thankfully, because I have some badass kids. So
Yeah.
anyhow, I get pregnant with my daughter, and my ex, I think I knew because there were some patterns, but I wasn't strong enough to know that these were flags. Like I had an idea, but I had never had a healthy relationship. And clearly because I wasn't healthy. So I'm also not privy and being participant of a healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really know, but I knew something was off. Well, then I'm pregnant, and he does like a 180. And he'll say it's because then he flips into, I've got to be a provider, that have this beautiful home, all these things. So, and I don't, that maybe that is where he went. Anyhow, the verbal abuse gets worse. I remember being pregnant, and I was like trying to feel good about myself. And I know there's some women that feel super sexy when they're pregnant and they love it. They think it's awesome. Well, I hated being pregnant. I felt fat, I felt sluggish. I was puking all the time. I'm like, this is the worst thing ever. So I was already not like the one that was like, oh, this is incredible. So I was like coming out one day, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to rock my body right now. I'm pregnant. I'm walking out, and this I will never forget. I walk out, and I'm like, hey, like trying to be all flirty. And he's like, no, that is not attractive. And I was like, oh, all right. So, and then the verbal abuse gets bad. I end up in the hospital a couple times, and I don't know how much I should divulge on here. And I have to tell the story. And anyhow, have the baby. She's beautiful. And we end up in the NICU because she's jaundice. Levels are really low, and she's sick. And he is like yelling at me, fighting with me. I'm like brand new mommy at this NICU hospital with nothing with me, no toothbrush, no nothing. Okay. His mom and sister here, I should have prefaced, he is from New York City. So his mom and sister are in town. He leaves and goes to the hotel to hang out with them, leaves me with nothing. So there's another.
At the time how old were you?
I had her at 20, let's see. So I have to do the math really quick. I got married at 24.
All right.
So I was
So you're a
20
kid. You're
I'm like,
25 years old.
let's see, I was 25 when I
Yeah.
had her.
All right.
I
So you're
was
still a kid.
young, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't the plan to have a baby
Yeah.
at that age.
Mhm.
Anyhow, so
Yeah.
he leaves. We progress. We end up moving out east. The abuse gets worse.
Mhm.
So bad. And I'm gonna say, so I'm used to physical abuse. Not that one's better than the other, right?
Yeah.
Because they're all crappy. And since I've never done any work and don't see that that's what I need to be doing, because I feel helpless, I guess, in a way. And I'm just like, well, now I'm married with a kid, just got to figure this out. Probably.
Yeah, now you're kind of stuck. Like
Yeah.
your options just went down a
Right.
lot. Right?
Yep. And now I'm out east, no family around me. And
Okay.
so, and it's getting so bad that I remember every morning we'd wake up and all I would hear is the F word repeatedly. And I was like, this is probably not a great way to wake up. And I do, man, I totally spaced. Before we moved there, I actually had my son who also got really sick. And he
Okay.
actually, you get released 2 days after having the baby. So I go home with him and he had shown some signs of being lethargic. I go home, my mom's in town and I'm going and getting ready to nurse him. I just changed him, he's on my shoulder. And I turn around after changing him, get ready to go nurse him. I'm walking downstairs with my mom and I look at him and I'm like, he's blue. My son is completely
Wow.
blue. Lips are gray. My mom grabs him out of my arms, like jolts him, and he takes a gasp of air. So he has like some color come back to his skin. Then I go panicking because I'm like, oh my God, my son's dying. And I call 911. This is a weird fluke thing in Utah that day where dispatch doesn't get any of the calls. And so my sister handles it. They end up showing up. They tell me I'm a first-time mom, and I was pissed. I kind of told them how I felt. Sent them away. Yeah, was not happy with them. So, anyways, we end up in the NICU with my son too, and same situation. I'm basically you have to have like a hazmat suit to see my son at this point. He's in a very protected area because they didn't think he was going to make it through the night. The doctor came out. It was like, I remember it being like a scene from the movies where the doctor comes out. I'm standing there in the hallway in this hospital, 2 days giving birth, and the doctor comes out and he was like, your son most likely may not make it through the night. And so I collapsed to the floor. So that's just one of the, like you see it in the movie. I just remember like collapsing and being like, this can't be happening. So my ex being who he is, he's not the most supportive. And that is his own stuff from growing up. And leaves again. I'm just sitting there in the hospital and we leave. Well, now we end up, my son's clearly is fine because now he's almost 13 years old. Okay. And the abuse keeps happening to the point that I was a mom that I don't even know or would never recognize.
How long were you married? How long did you stick around for all of this?
12 years.
12 years.
Okay. So we were together for 15.
So fast forward. So 12 years you were in the marriage, you put up with it, 15 years of the total abuse.
Yep.
And now you're divorced.
Yeah, it happened, and this is the last pivotal one. There's 3 pivot points: the rape, the gunshot, and then this one. Those are the 3 that I think are the most standout. So 5.5 years ago, I used to do stuff in the silks. So if you've ever been to a circus show, you know how they like wrap themselves in silks. So I used to do that, and I would train people. Well, one day I'm at the studio. I just finished a private session, and I don't recall too much of it because I fell on my head. But I was up in the air and came down and literally fell on the crown of my head. So I just head first on the ground. Someone had moved my mat because usually you have like a mat underneath you. Mine was no longer there. And the fall was so intense that it ruptured the thickest part of my skull. I don't really know this. I'm on the floor. The client that was with me has to go get her kid. So my phone gets pushed over to me and I'm sitting there falling on my head. So I'm like sitting there with a phone next to me and I'm like, what do I do? And I can't move. So I call my husband at the time and I guess my words were slurring, he says at this point, and I'm just like screaming, help me, I fell, help me. Yeah. 45 minutes pass. 45 minutes pass.
And you're there by yourself.
Solo. Nobody is there.
The client left.
Yep. I'm alone. 45 minutes, I call again and I'm like screaming, help, help, help. I'm slurring my words. Apparently he gets pulled over. There's a cop that can hear me in his car screaming for help. Cop doesn't give him a ticket. He leaves. He drags me down the hallway. By the time he gets there, he's more annoyed, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
And moves me, which I think we all learned at some point, you don't move a head injury, but
Yeah.
we did. And then we go to the hospital. They find my fractured skull. They see that I'm bleeding. And they said it was trace amounts. So they were like, she'll be able to absorb it. She's got a really bad concussion and a fractured skull. We're going to send her home. Well, they only x-rayed from my neck up. They didn't examine anything else. They sent me home and they were like, make sure she doesn't fall asleep. If she does, she won't wake up. So he sends me home and I've got my ex taking care of me. And my daughter will actually recount this because she remembers it so well. This was a very traumatizing event for the kids. She just remembers her dad taking me and like trying to shake me to wake me up to make me take a pain pill. And essentially I just slipped into a 3-day slumber. And when I woke up, my mom and sister were in town. And I remember like standing up because I was like, oh, I want to see them. And I went to stand up out of bed and I get up and I scream with the most amount of pain I've ever had in my life and collapse completely paralyzed from the neck down. What was that?
I don't know. It was loud though.
Yeah, I don't even know how that just happened. And so I can't move. Anyways, I end up having intermittent paralyzation moments where I keep collapsing. And my friend that's a doctor prescribes me to go in and then examine from the neck down. They discover C4, 5, and 6 are into my spinal cord. The sac is bulging to the side. I'm now 7-week meditation, can't move. I declined my neurosurgeon from surgery. She worked really closely with me. My speech is gone. I have rapid eye movement from a stage 4 concussion, brain injury, and then the intermittent paralyzation. I couldn't even bend my body anymore. So this being the pivotal moment, this is when I was laying there and I was like, something's got to change. So I feel like the universe gave me, or God, or whatever you want to refer to, gave me 3 opportunities to literally wake up because I'm here for a different purpose. And this was the finale of it. Like, how close can we get you to saying why you're here? And it's to stop messing around and like see what your worth is. So falling on my head was that final one. So I start studying the brain because I've got to rewire because I can't speak. And so I start studying the brain, food, what happens there, how to physically heal my body because I don't want surgery. And from that, when I start to heal, speech comes back, I start to teach again. And I started to study yoga therapy. So like basically like a therapist that utilizes yoga in hybrid. And from that, I remember driving home and I was like, this is what I'm going to do. If I can heal myself through the trauma of experiences from 14 to the laundry list of experiences that I can't ever recount all in one story, to that fall on my head to heal even in a physical sense, then to help my brain rewire, I've got to be able to help other individuals heal in the same capacity. So I gained enough strength to divorce my husband and start my business.
Okay. So, and this is how you got into self-improvement through using yoga, was through all of those experiences.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the most important part is the rape, because that was the beginning, and
that's what started it. Yeah, that's
and
what
so many people this happens to, more than we even realize. So many people, and they don't realize there's ways to not hold that because it's not ours. No one takes it. Like we give it. It's ours to keep. And if more people start to understand that no one gets to take that from you, no matter what it is.
Have you gone through, and for people that listen to my show on a regular basis, they'll know in November, I went through this myself where I went to all the people, including my parents and some other people, and actually told them how much I hated them, how much I despised them, how much I think saying that I hated them was enough, but and then told them I loved them, I forgave them for them, and how that transformed for me, because I kind of felt like I walked in carrying this big old backpack or truckload of boulders on me that was holding me down, and when I left it all with them. I gave it back to them, Have you gone through that yourself
I
where,
have I have not done that, but that analogy you
yeah,
just used, I used on one of my retreats, and I was like, we all have a backpack. And how many
yeah,
stones do you want to keep stacking in that bad boy? I love that you just used that.
yeah,
I have not actually done that, and I have not gone to the guy that happened with in the very
mhm,
beginning.
yeah,
I've done, I think, in the same aspect though, I've done the same, I guess, in a way of being like, you know what, he's the one that has to carry that, and I'm not
yeah,
carrying that weight. Like, dude, you
yeah,
can hold that. I'm totally fine, because
hmm,
I now view it as a pivot point in my life where one thing leads to another, and that just catapulted me into being able to offer where I am now.
yeah. It was in Don Miguel's book, Five Levels of Attachment, where he talks about it. And I can tell you that even if you can't physically tell someone that, he has a whole chapter of how to do it step by step, of to do it. Even like I did it with my stepdad, who used to beat and torture me and my siblings. Well, he had died, so obviously I couldn't do it. He was already dead. And but I still did it because I believe in most, not most people, a lot of people like Joe Dispenza and probably you
Yeah.
believe that we're all connected through the universe. We're all energy, and we don't actually die. The energy just transfers to a different type of body, or whatever you believe on that. And so even though that person's not in front of you, even though you can't physically talk to that person, whether they're dead or across the street or millions of miles away, you can still connect with that person. There's still an energy transference with them.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's really important, that if someone has gone through a traumatic experience, that you walk through that cleansing procedure where
Right.
you tell them how much they hurt you and you tell them how bad it felt. And then ultimately you forgive them, because when you forgive them, you forgive but not forget. And that I think a lot of people get that confused. Forgiveness is you're going to leave it with them. Forget, you're not going to forget it, because that's what made you who you are, and that was your pivotal point to help you become where you are. And if that didn't happen to you, Jenny, at 14, and then later on with your other experiences, you couldn't connect with young women the way you connect and
No,
even
not at all.
men, right?
Right.
That had to happen. I shouldn't say it had to happen, but because it happened, it allows you to connect with people in a way that someone who had not gone through it could
Yeah.
not connect with them, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's always two ways to look at anything, right? And circumstances and obstacles always occur in our life. And so however you choose to look at them is what is going to change the way
Yeah.
you move through life. Right? It's all a way
So,
to keep growing.
what specifically, like, give me an example of what you've done with somebody that's gone to one of your yoga retreats, or I know things are a little bit different. I'm recording this right now during the COVID pandemic.
It's changed things a little bit for how I
It
like to.
has changed things. But
Yeah.
give me an example, like somebody you've helped, and what you've done with that person.
Yeah, there's a few. It's always so hard to pick one. Um, there was a woman that came to my last retreat, and it was in Tulum, Mexico. So mine are
Okay.
not just women, although I am probably going to do an all women's one. I digress. Let's go back.
All right.
But in this retreat, it was men and women, and there was a woman that came. She didn't come with anyone, and she was at the retreat. And I do a different approach. And yes, Joe Dispenza is like one of my all-time. I love him.
Mhm.
And so I do a lot of work as far as like the people would be familiar with understanding what that is. And then I do, yes, the yoga side, lots of meditation, and then we do a lot of physical activities. And then I use my therapy side, but not on the therapy side that most people know. And so we'll
Okay.
do like kind of like discussions, and I move people through experiences in a intentional way. Anyways, this woman was sitting there, and through the sequence of events that have happened at the retreat and how the movement of the retreat it kind of arcs. Like, so we peak people at this point. She's at this point where everything's coming up to the surface, and we're sitting, we're having a discussion. You can see the discomfort. She's constantly moving. She's like adjusting in her seat. She's like kind of like getting small, and I know what's happening. And I'm observing the shift in her physical appearance. And so I looked at her, and I had asked a specific question in a very specific way. And she starts to speak. And she starts to say these few things. Now, mind you, this is all in a setting of, I don't have very big retreats because of what I do. And I need to be able to manage the energy. But there's 12 other people, or 11 other people, and then her. And they all start to interject as she speaks, because when a woman speaks, or a man, when someone speaks and you can see that they're like scared or in this immense amount of pain because they're recounting an experience, you want to be like, oh, you're amazing. You're so incredible. Don't forget how awesome you are. Instead of allowing the person to literally vomit out or release what it is that's inside of them. So I tell the other people, you know what, this is her moment. Let her speak. As uncomfortable as you may get, sit in it and allow her to move through what's going through her. So she starts to purge out exactly that she had never told a soul in her life. So no one's ever heard the story, and it's account from abuse to molestation to polygamy to, I mean, like things that never had been talked about, like molestation from her sibling and an uncle. And she, like, at the end of it, you could see like this full release and her being at peace. And she was like, you know what, thank you for holding space and supporting me to feel good enough to be able to speak that. So there's one, just allowing the expression. Then the other part of what happens in the retreat, then I start to implement the tool side of things, so that people don't just purge out this situation. Then what, right? Then how do you move through the rest of your life? And so then you know, from that point, I give her these tools to take home with her. Like, we move through the rest of the retreat, and it's a healing part. So the last portion of the retreat is a very integrative part of the retreat to prepare people to go home. And she now has come out that she's a lesbian. She's like full on taken on her whole life and has implemented so many of the tools, and will definitely say that that retreat was her pivot point to change the whole path of her life and actually living in her life, right? Setting herself free and not thinking she has to be a certain person anymore, and stepping into her own.
You know, I went through a couple of retreats, if you want to call it like that. One was with Joel Bauer. He's the one that really taught me how to do public speaking, and it was at an event called Passion to Profit, which he no longer does, but it's called Take Your Passion, Turn It Into a Profit. And, you know, that pivots, your whole life will change from that moment. It's like you're going this way and you immediately make a 90-degree turn and everything changes. So, and I feel that way with you, that people that are seeking a change just don't know how to do it on their own. They're drawn to you. You can be their coach, if you will, to help them make that right turn or that left turn and change their entire life from that moment forward.
Right.
So I think it's really important what you do. So with that, how do people find you? Where do they go? Where are you at?
Where am I at? Wow.
I know you're in Salt Lake,
I'm in
but
Salt Lake.
Yeah, online, where do we find you?
Yeah, Jenny Does Yoga, I think, is one of like the easiest ways to find me on Instagram, just because it's, I mean, pretty simple to remember that Jenny.
Instagram, that's the social media platform that silences and censors the truth. That one?
What is that? Oh man, that was getting me started.
That one's going on right now, right?
Yeah, man.
So is Instagram your platform of choice?
I think it's just a great way for people just to quickly search, because it's easier to remember. But I do.
Okay. So Jenny Does Yoga. That's how they found Jenny Instagram. All right.
Yeah, and then because my retreats are a little harder to remember, so I just figured that's like when you hear Jenny Does Yoga, I think it just kind of sinks right in.
Okay, so if someone wanted to go to one of your retreats, they could reach out to you at Jenny Does Yoga.
For sure.
On Instagram.
Yeah, Yep, for sure they can, and then I can kind of guide them through that. And I do a lot of one-on-one sessions online now.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yep, I started doing that because people are in need, and why not offer that in a way that I do really love the one-on-one person connection.
Yeah.
However, we have to make the best of the situation, and no one needs to stay feeling stuck or whatever they may be feeling. And if I'm a piece of that pivot point, you get to offer that financial piece, and if I can offer the spiritual shift side of things too,
Yeah.
I mean, the combination of the two then catapults them forward. Like there's no reason to stay feeling in a heaviness any longer. And I think our friend, when she called me about what went down, I was like, now's the time to speak. Like, man, if you've been raped, abused, or whatever it is, seek help, because these small tools that you implement on a daily basis will change your whole life, the whole life. My daughter knows my story in detail. And the cool thing is she has enough strength and confidence to watch her interact with a guy, because she's almost 16 and she's a beautiful girl. She's very good at being able to be like, no, and stand her ground. And she's so confident and knows the other side of things that most people don't want to talk about. But she understands that there's two sides. It's not just rainbows and unicorns all the time, right?
Yeah. Now, I want to say something about that just because you go through this and that you forgive your abuser and that you're working on it, it still takes work afterwards. Like it's not like one and done and it's over with and you just move on.
Mm-hmm.
A few weeks ago, I was in Alaska and we went to this resort lodge, whatever. It's not really a resort, it's a lodge. And it was me and 5 of my good friends. And we go on this commercial boat to do some fishing. And the captain is fishing captains, especially Alaska fishing captains, are a very unique type of person. And this one happened to be a very small person. I'm 6'3", I'm a very large person. And he's having a bad day. And so my buddies, there's 2 of them that were on this commercial fishing thing, and there's 2 of them. And they screwed something up, or I don't know. We're rookies. We don't know anything about commercial fishing. I mean, you get a commercial fishing license and you go out, and what happens is you keep half of the fish, and you could literally catch hundreds and hundreds of salmon, halibut, cod, whatever. And so he starts screaming at my friends. And my job on this fishing boat it was a club about this long, and it has this big hook on the end of it that as you bring up the salmon, you hook them and basically you stab them and you bring them into the boat. So as he starts verbally abusing my friends, I go back to this 12-year-old little boy, and I get to the corner, and I just stand there with this freaking club in my hand with this hook, right? And later on that night, we get back to the lodge, and my buddies are like, why didn't you defend us? You just stood over there in the corner, like you wimped out on us. And you didn't defend us, and you saw what happened. It wasn't our fault. The wind picked up. It was a really windy day. We were having like 8-foot swells. The lines kind of crossed and it got all tangled up. And I told them, I said, look, the reason that I was, in their words, cowering in the corner, which I wasn't cowering, but I was standing in the corner out of the way, was I went back to that 11, 12 years old where my stepdad used to beat the shit out of us. And you would retreat to a corner and let him beat someone else up while you stood in the corner. And I felt horrible about it, but they're like, why didn't you do anything? And I said, because I was afraid I was going to like beat the shit out of the guy with this club. So even though I've done all this work and I've gone through it and I'm highly functional now, you still have these things. And the reason I brought that up was for folks watching this or listening, and they're going through it and they have hiccups or they have scenarios where they mess up. It's okay. Like it's a constant work in process.
Yeah.
or progress is, that's probably the right word to say, constant
Yeah.
work in progress.
Yeah.
That it just doesn't happen overnight, because, I talked about, me forgive my mom and my dad and how it felt when I left, like I left the rocks there. Doesn't mean it takes away all of it. You don't forget it. You still constantly reprogramming your mind. And I think with what you're doing, it would help even more with the yoga, to where you can tie that together and really work that healing through the yoga. So
Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought that up. Did you know you actually emotionally stop aging at the incident of trauma?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's exactly why, and I'm a grown woman and I will revert, not in the same manner now as I used to. And I never understood why my behavior would be one of a 14-year-old, right? Until
yeah,
I completely started understanding that, well, that's because that's where I stopped emotionally aging.
yeah.
And
I
then,
know that happened with my kids' mother. She was
yeah,
like that, and I didn't realize that until I went to some counseling for
right.
myself, and I figured that out. And I could understand her a lot more when she would revert back to that, 12, 13-year-old kid,
Right.
even 40-year-old woman.
Yeah, and the physical
Mm.
body stores it, and that's
Yeah,
where
and it does.
yoga comes
Mhm.
into a really great like additive to like
Mhm.
therapy or things like that. Because then you can, the way I teach is very different, so it's a very it's not like the typical yoga that you would experience. I
Yeah.
hybrid a lot of like almost like a meditative experience while you're moving through an intense
Okay.
experience. Yeah,
Very cool.
so it's like
All
rewiring.
right. So if people want to find you and reach out to you, it would be Jenny Does Yoga on Instagram. That's the best way to go, right?
Or they can try Reset and Renew Yoga, but I feel like they're going to remember Jenny Does Yoga a lot easier.
Okay. Jenny Does Yoga on Instagram. There you go. Jenny, it has been awesome having you on the show.
Thanks for
And
having me.
congrats for your first/second podcast
Well, thanks for
ever.
letting me be your first yogi.
Yes, it's been awesome. You're going to have to come to Idaho and go whitewater rafting with Amanda and I.
That
That'd be great.
would be awesome, actually.
The water's actually great right now here in Idaho. The snow is finally slowed down a little bit in the melt. And so the waves, or not the waves, but the cubic feet per second is a lot lower. So you can safely whitewater raft in
That would be fun.
the Payette River outside of Boise. So
That would
we'll
be
have to
awesome.
talk about that later. So,
Yeah, I love that.
all right. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. As always, if there's anything I can do for you with your credit, your taxes, your retirement, reach out on any of the social media platforms at Rondi Lambeth. I'm pretty easy to find at Rondi Lambeth. So thanks again, Jenny. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks.